Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee meeting to order. First, we'd like to invite any community comments. Seeing none, we are going to go to our reports. Ms. McCoy.
Great. So we had our first official meeting of the Professional Development Committee this year, and they seem to be very pleased as to how things are going. Since then, we have launched our first iteration of the Ideas course that's offered through EDCO, and I just launched it 2 hours ago, and we already have 3 people signed up, so that's a pretty good sign. People checking in after hours. So that'll start up in January, and we'll hopefully continue to offer that over the course of the next few years so that more and more people have the opportunity to take it. Dr. Keough and I both got to see Mr. Joy Dasgupta come in and present to some of our students after school. It's an optional drop-in to talk about artificial intelligence. And he's hoping to bring the kids together for 6 to 8 sessions, and they're going to learn about machine learning and actually develop a prototype to solve some sort of problem that they think is important, which is really neat. So, otherwise, the academic innovation, the dates have been updated, so thank you all for volunteering, and the agendas for those meetings are coming together with guest speakers and lots of processing and research to do, so that's exciting. On a related note, there were 5 of us who went to the EF headquarters in Boston this weekend. It was Dr. Brown and Laura Dayal, John Smith, Stephen Robleski, and myself. And it was a global symposium, and it was exciting because generally speaking, they only chose 1 or 2 educators from each state in the United States to come, and they let all 5 of us in from Dover-Sherborn, knowing that we're focusing on the portrait of a graduate and the skills necessary moving forward. So we got to hear from lots of interesting presenters from all over the world, and it kind of reinforced where we're headed and what we're doing. And I really enjoyed the opportunity to have the elementary principals, along with Stephen from the middle school, and John kind of talking about how we're going to attack this as a K-12 system and what they can do to support each other as we move towards project-based learning, authentic assessment, and those sorts of things. So that was great. And lastly, more planning towards the FUS program as our kiddos prepare to move to the 6th grade next year. I have a conference call tomorrow with a longtime director of World Language, K-12, so she's going to give me insight into the Brookline program, which I know you folks looked at when you initially started the program, and we're also talking to Holliston, which I know we trying to replicate their system to some extent and make it our own, but we'll probably be doing visits to their middle school to see how they incorporated their FUS program into the 6th grade as their program evolved. So all coming along.
That's terrific.
Question.
Sure.
So for the Academic Innovation Committee, that's 68-ish people that expressed an interest. Are all 68 of those people going to be at the January 18th meeting, or is it there going to be a combination of people at those meetings and then at the, what you talk about as the community-wide events?
Right. So thank you. That's a good question. In terms of the educators, all of the educators will be at all of the meeting events. A number of parents have since volunteered, so we're up in the 80 range. And while I would like to include all of the parents, I just don't think it's going to be a productive conversation if we have that many. So what I've tried to do is, based on the explanations and information they provided in their response, I'm trying to sort out who would be beneficial on the long-term meeting agenda as we go through the process versus who might have something to offer on the panel and actually be a presenter during one of the community-wide events. So I'm hoping they'll be either or.
So is the idea for this to be as much of a public process as opposed to a more meaningful dig down deep process, just given the size of the groups?
It's supposed to be a lot of people coming together to generate stakeholder views. It's supposed to be a larger process, and then within that group we'll break into subgroups based on topics and areas of interest to do deeper dives to then report back to the larger group. And then from there, once we have kind of the competencies for what we think our graduates should be and we come up with a design, then next year it'll really be the responsibility of the educators in the district to dive in and say, okay, how do we implement this into the classroom and the curriculum? Does that make sense?
Yep.
There's a lot of excitement.
I know, this is terrific. Any questions? Okay, moving on then.
We We've done a lot of reflecting in the days and weeks following our last joint school committee meeting, talking about the special ed reorg proposal. I've met with quite a few people to discuss it further. We appreciate the feedback that we've gotten from school committee members from across the 3 districts, and we're looking forward to kind of giving a little more concrete information at our December joint meeting. We're hoping to do that on the 4th. I think we discussed that as a back-to-back to this meeting, I believe, to the regional. And hopefully we can, make all that work timing-wise. But it's really actually been a really good process for us, and I think it's important to just note how needed this was. It was really important for these 3 districts to take a deeper dive into special education. I know that it's always a challenge. I know the districts have been through it before, looking at special ed and the kind of the structure, but you don't always get it right. And so we think that we're onto something here, but we definitely think that there are things that could be tweaked or more clearly defined and explained for people. So that's what we're working on for the December meeting. But as I said, I do appreciate people letting us know what they're thinking, and we have been hearing, so that's good. I went to a great Challenge Success event on October 20th. I want to thank Pam Webb for supporting us and including us in that really discussion. But it was initially a presentation by Denise Pope, who I'm sure many people from Dover and Sherborn have heard speak. But also she was on stage presenting with a gentleman, Rick Weisbord from Harvard, who runs the Making Caring Common program. He's out of the Graduate School of Ed. He is a fabulous guy. I know I've mentioned in the past that I've actually gone in and worked with his group and participated in their discussions. This is a really nice dovetailing of 2 really hyper-focused organizations on what can we do about kind of where our kids are at in terms of the pressures on our kids, and whether it's the college application process or this need to be exceptional. And one of the things they talked about that I thought was really important that we'll more than likely mention on Thursday night is this idea that, this pursuit of the good college that we always hear our kids say they want to get into a good college. They really honed in, kind of dug down into that, and were discussing really the importance that they find through the data on the degree to which students are engaged, and that being actually the real true success determinant. If the kids are engaged in their college, it really doesn't matter where they go. If they are engaged in the learning and engaged in the activities that are, that they're exposed to, good things happen. So they did a nice job. It was a great conversation. I gave you the link to that. That was the Challenge Success brief video that summarizes their white paper. We're doing an event Thursday night along with Challenge Success, or sponsored by Challenge Success, where we're kind of diving in a little more deeply into what we're doing, what we've done with our work towards innovative teaching and learning, and our work towards meeting the social emotional challenges of our students. And so we are going to talk about what we've done as a system, what we're doing currently, and what we're hoping to do. So that's Thursday night here in the middle school choral room. So that should be fun. I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Mr. Sweeney and his students in the television production course at the high school. they run a really top quality program, and I was happy to be there and to participate with the kids. Not so impressed with my own performance, but it's always tough to be on television and then watch yourself and say, geez, I wish I had said this or said that or didn't say this. But it was fun. I also had a nice visit with the folks in the Bridge program. And that was really, really helpful for me to sit down with the kids in the program and with the staff and to just to see how effective that program has been. That is a true gift, and I want to give the folks who were here when it happened, it was before my time, all the credit, because that was a really smart move on the part of this district, and it's been very beneficial for our students. And then kudos to Kendall Robbins and Danny Bennett for their healthy and spirited debate. Danny representing Stephen Deal and Kendall Elizabeth Warren. It was impressive. I'm amazed how much these kids know about the positions of those two candidates. It was fantastic. I also didn't mention in my report that I had a chance to go to a Medeco Retreat for all the Medeco community superintendents in Boston on Friday. I actually went with Monique Marshall-Beal. It was fabulous. The discussion really centered around what does it mean to be a Medeco community. And I think it really helped us to give feedback to the new leadership of Medeco. And I found it really worthwhile. I also had a nice meeting this afternoon with our Boston students, which I plan to do monthly as a check-in and see how things are going. I had some great conversation with them and learned quite a bit.
I have a question. Not every community takes Medeco students.
Right.
How many do you have any idea?
I think it's 13.
Only 13 communities in the Commonwealth?
Right? I might be wrong on that. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Judy. I need to check that. But if you look at a map, it's really the northern and western suburbs, and then a handful like Hingham down on the South Shore.
Yeah.
It's surprising to me that it's only us. But I need to also draw attention to the fact that this is actually Dover-Sherborn's 50th year with Medeco. So I'm personally proud of that fact.
Yeah.
I loved coming to school with students from Boston. I learned so much from them and appreciated having them as part of my life growing up. And I feel the same way with my own children. So I'm really paying attention to the program and doing what we can to support them.
There are 38 school districts
Nice
in
try.
metropolitan Boston and
Nice try.
4 districts outside of Springfield.
So it's off by just a few.
Yeah.
Actually, the Medeco program has drawn a lot of attention from New Jersey, Connecticut, and there was one other state that are trying to do something similar. So
Can I ask a question? A couple of right-size questions. We had talked last year maybe about whether our size from Medeco is about right. Any feel that had changed, or any insight into that after having a meeting with the superintendents?
I didn't because they're all very different. But I will say that I know it's hard for our kids. It's a very small cohort of students, and that's a function of our small size. But I would love to entertain the prospect of adding some students. Even a few can make all the difference in the world. It's a great opportunity for those kids to attend a great school system. We get so much out of having them here. It's a blessing for us. So I would certainly love to do that. I think our biggest issue is around class sizes and making sure that we can accommodate more students. But usually you start that at the younger grades because typically kids don't want to start in high school. So it's really about Pine Hill and Chickering being amenable to that. And that's certainly something we could talk about. Although we do have kids come in 5th grade. I talked to a few kids today who started in 5th grade. So
I think part of it is capacity at the bus because we run one bus, and so that sometimes comes into play.
I think you were right.
Right.
That was a conversation.
But what does a bus typically carry?
60-ish.
I don't know what the
I
capacity.
think it's 60-ish, depending on the size.
I mean, they're all different, right?
Yeah.
So but I think ours are about around 60. I'd have to check that. So that wouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker.
We talked about that before. That was one of the things.
And then the bridge program, having spent some time in there, does that seem about right-sized? Is that seeming like, I haven't had an update on that for a while.
So,
Is that at capacity?
well, so that's a really tricky one because we don't know when our kids are going to necessarily need it.
Okay.
It's a program that if you don't have it and suddenly you have even 3 or 4 students who really desperately need it, then we don't have any alternative for those kids, and that can be disastrous. So right now, well, I met with a relatively small group, but they seem to indicate that they're very busy. Addie Perez Krebs and George Jenkins indicate that they're very, very busy providing support for the kids. We're not a 1,500 student school. I'm sure that's why there was a debate over whether or not we should even have a bridge program, because our numbers are not going to be the same that you would generate in a 1,600 student school. But if it can be a real lifeline to even a small number of our kids, it's absolutely worth having.
Can I just also add that from a financial perspective, for those students, this is purely financial. For some of those students, they wouldn't be in school. We'd be required to provide them with
their education outside.
Educational outside. And so if people are worried about the cost, I really do think that it's a no-brainer that we're certainly covering our costs.
I was just wondering if they have enough seats, like if they're almost too many kids are being serviced, or is it about right?
Well,
That's what I
right
was
now
just
it's about
curious.
right. But, remember, we're in year 2 of a 3-year grant. And so I wasn't even thinking actually about the cost, because from my perspective, it's well worth it whether you have a grant or if you're not saving money. But the fact is, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. Generally speaking, if you look back into the past, you'll see kids having left Dover-Sherborn because there wasn't a program like that. So I think it's a
not
really good
100%
thing.
funded by the grant. We do carry some of the costs.
Was the first year?
The first year, the plan was to sort of you work yourself up to the full year. We've been able to not put as much into the budget in year 2 because we had some savings in year 1. You have to use all the money within the 3 years, or you forfeit it. So we had to take advantage of the money. So the academic coordinator is fully in your budget, and it's the social worker counselor that we will start adding in your fiscal year 20 budget.
And 21 will be both.
Next year.
And then 21 will be both, right? That's when the grant runs out.
And is it my understanding that this is a program that not only addresses kids who might have emotional needs, but also, if a kid breaks a leg and is out of school for a long time and needs to come back, that this is literally a bridge to help them take on academics so that it's not just all falling on the guidance counselors, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Most people who have children in the high school know how much work our kids do.
Oh, absolutely.
And that amount is, it just seems to grow exponentially with time out. And so if you've been out for any reason, whether it was for significant emotional issues or in the hospital for, physical issues, whatever, if you miss a big period of time, it's really tough to come back and be greeted with literally a stack of work that you have to do on top of your current work. It's just that's a big ask. If any of your kids, one of mine took all the AP classes, there's no way she could have missed a week or 2.
Yeah. And I think speaking as a person who's had family members have to miss chunks of school, in the prior iteration before Bridge was available, that meant a big load on the guidance counselor and the student, communicating with and running to each of their teachers. And not that the teachers are not going to be flexible about it, but each of them are dealing with their own deadlines. And to know that there is a program in the school that's going to help literally bridge that for kids who face all manner of challenges is just a huge relief.
Yeah, my understanding is the program is really a big success.
Yeah.
I-
Any feedback any other way? I mean,
No,
anything we're not doing? Yeah.
That's why I wanted to
program.
mention it. I think it is a big success, and I think that I'm just impressed that so many communities are starting to see that as a worthwhile initiative, and I'm glad we did.
Any other questions, comments?
No.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, both of you. John?
So you included, I realized I devoted myself on this memo, back to interim business manager. But I was looking at, and it's not a typo, but I have a little bit about fiscal year 19, a little bit about fiscal year 18, and a little bit about fiscal year 20. So that gives you sort of perspective that we're always in all the years.
Yeah.
It's always something going on. But this is your first month where you received your statement of revenues. And so at this point, we're projecting everything to be on budget, except for we know we are getting a little bit extra in Chapter 70 and Chapter 71, which we reported last month. So where that can fluctuate a little is if we have any additional school choice students or a charter school tuition, that could impact our Chapter 70, but this is where we're projected to be barring any changes on that. You'll notice that we've almost collected all of our high school parking fees, and that is based on the fact that because we now have a plenitude of spaces, we let both seniors and juniors pay in full, which is streamlining the process and saving us a lot of pushing paper back and forth. So I applaud the high school admin office for asking if that was okay to do. I don't foresee us being in a lottery position, so it was fine to do that, and it gets that out of the way, and it's one less housekeeping tip or task they have to worry about, and then the students don't have to worry about paying on a monthly basis either if they're a junior. So that you'll still have additional revenues come in as new drivers age in park. So we should be fine on that. On the expenditure side, really not a lot has changed since we spoke last month. One thing we are continuing to do is attacking the healthcare reporting is always a task in itself. So we did go and split all of our current costs between our actives and retirees, because you remember your statement before had nothing for retirees. So that piece is done, and we will have projections in there for you when we present the fiscal year 20 budget. So it'll be a joint. We'll give you where we are for fiscal year 19 and then project where we look fiscal year 20 is going to be. Other than that, the only other thing is to note that we did finally hit our year of the net metering agreement, and so for the first year, our saving, or not our savings, but our credit on our utility bills yielded us $22,500. So that is, sort of free money for the opportunity that the school committee was willing to take back in December 2016. And then just keep in mind that the regional transportation funds, that has an impact on your variance that you're seeing for transportation. The other thing that we shared is your first quarterly statement of your special revenue and revolving funds, and parlaying that to the regional transportation fund. You'll see that the balance in that fund as of July 1st was $229,000. We are charging $229,000 of transportation costs to that, so we will deplete that fund, but that's where you can see the flip side of what we're seeing on the general fund. And then the other thing, obviously, there's a lot of activity in the miscellaneous gift fund, primarily related to the Mudge lighting project that we have spoken about, but now you can actually see the numbers play out in your activity. And then behind you just have a detailed list of what is remaining in the gift funds. As you can see, we've sort of have been reaching out to various groups to try to spend some of the money that's been sitting there for a while. We've been carrying forward some money for the wireless microphones since 2011. That combined with some new gifts that both several of the parent groups donated. They've updated that whole system now, and we've depleted that whole fund. So that we've cleaned that up, and then obviously to date we've spent all the money that we were holding restricted for the Mudge auditorium with the lighting project.
Great.
So 18, just to give you a quick little synopsis, as of Friday, our E&D was certified, so that is now available for the school committee to utilize as needed, and then the $150,000 that we allocated to the fiscal year 19 budget, we will now move that to revenue to be used as a funding source. We did file the end of the year report by the October 1st deadline, and our auditors then will come in and they will do a compliance report on that, and that will be completed by the March 31st reporting deadline. Our annual audit is complete, but we are going to move the presentation to January in order to accommodate the double meeting that we have on December 4th. It was a lot to sort of cram it all in one, and it also gives them a little bit more time because they're still waiting for Norfolk County to release their audited statements, because there's a footnote in our statements and then there's a piece on our balance sheet. So that gives them a little more breathing room on that. So that worked out well for both of us. And then on 20, I just want to give you a little update on our fiscal year 20 capital planning. We try to get more involved in the capital planning for 20 or the next year in the summer, but we had a lot of capital projects going on here and at Pine Hill that sort of depleted the availability for Mr. Kelly and myself. So we're sort of catching up. We have some really important meetings coming up on both the roof and also the EMS project that we're still sort of trying to get started. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some really good news for you on those fronts by the time we meet in December. We've got 3 meetings set up between now and when I need to get the packet done on that. And we're also still evaluating. There's several things that were on your fiscal year 20 plan when we presented it as a 5-year plan last year that were sort of going away. Mainly one of them was lighting at the Mudge, which that was just sort of a blessing that was taken care of. So that will be an item that we take off. If you remember, we had the water suppression tank that we were going to go do the underwater dive camera. So that has been completed. And it looks like that there is nothing significant that needs to be done. We could probably take care of that in maintenance. We're just waiting to get, they had 2 recommendation items. One was just to clean, to drain it and clean it. But then they're going to do just a further inspection on a couple other little things. But we don't see that necessarily as going to be a capital ask. And then we're going to dig deeper into the roof project and see where we're going to go with that. We have a meeting set up with a solar company to sort of see how we can sort of parlay into that. So we'll have some more information for you in December, and then you can do your first approval of that, and we'll pass that on to both towns at that time.
That's great. Questions? Okay, well, thank you, Dawn. That's terrific.
Great. So I provided to you some of our standardized test scores, and these are obviously the MCAS for grades 3 through 10, as well as kind of a 30,000-foot overview of SAT and ACT and how many exams that we have provided over the last 5 years and our scores and how they fluctuated over that time. And in the December report, we'll have kind of a deeper dive at the high school level into each of the subjects, so you can kind of see how math, English, science, world language are doing independently. As you know, this is the second year that on the MCAS front, our students have, in grades 3 through 8, have participated in the next generation assessment, which is supposed to be more rigorous, involve more higher order thinking, more similar to, I think, the Keough, which is what they're trying to aim for, whereas grade 10 and the science exams are all still of the old format. So we now have 2 data points into the new next generation exams that we can kind of compare, and legacy, obviously, we can continue to compare because it's been the same for years. Interestingly enough, the average for the state, 50% of the students fell above and had meeting expectations or exceeding expectations, and interestingly, 50% had not meeting expectations or lower. I can't imagine how that bar was set, but Dover-Sherborn due to the quality of our teaching and learning and the efforts of our students and teachers and parents, we continue to perform well above that 50% mark. And by the time our students get to 10th grade, we have almost all, if not all, getting proficient or advanced in all 3 subjects, so that's excellent. Between 3rd grade and 10th grade, I will say that the individual principals at the schools are kind of doing item analyses with their teachers to see if there are kind of takeaways or patterns within writing or within some sort of math skill. But as we all know, this is one snapshot in time and one piece of data that we should not rest our hats on solely. Any questions?
So because it's the new test, then how do you use it then to create any sort of comparison or?
You can't really, yeah.
Yeah, so how are they're using it? You said they're doing teachers doing a deeper dive. How are they using it to figure?
So they're not necessarily comparing from year to year. They're just looking at how students within a grade, within a class, or how an individual student did in various sections of the exam, just to see if there was one question that all the students had difficulty with, or one topic that everybody had difficulty with, and what does that say about the instruction of the curriculum and what could be done differently.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was getting at. Is it more of a curricular, looking at the curriculum? They feel fairly confident that it's well aligned.
I think that, we don't purposely, we don't teach to the test, although we are aligned with the curriculum.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that at the elementary level, having come out of the English language arts review last year, that there, some tweaks to be had on one side of the river in reading and the other side of the river in writing, and this gave them another data set to be able to look at that. So, but I think middle and high school are in pretty good shape.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Goal review?
Yes.
Take it away.
So I appreciate being able to kind of move this down to this meeting as opposed to the last one where we had the joint meeting. There was clearly going to be, that was going to be a stretch for all of us. I think we had run out of bandwidth that night. So, and one of the things I want to suggest for my goals in the future moving forward is that we do this process in the June meeting so that it's already established and taken care of. I think I was basically working off of last year's, which also came kind of later in the year. But now that we have the strategic plan in place, the school improvement plans are in place, that's really the time to do it. So hopefully, if that's okay with, plus my evaluation takes place right after that, or in that time slot before that, actually. So to me, that seems like the right time to do it. If not June, then right out of the gates in September is fairly typical. So so you can see that my goals really align pretty closely with the strategic plan. And that is the beauty of having a strategic plan, is that my goals align with it, our principals' goals align with it, our school goals align with it, and that allows for, frankly, greater accountability because they are what they are, and we either do them or we don't. In this particular case, you'll see on Goal 1, revisiting school start times is in fact a goal, and I'm just really putting the notices out this week about when that will begin. Remember, this particular start time committee is going to have representatives from the 3 committees and representatives from the administration of both levels. Myself, Don Fattori, a parent, hopefully a student, but this is a very streamlined committee. So this is not like your last committee where you had 20 plus people, and it's a challenging topic for so many. What we were committed to, and what I was committed to right out of the gates on this, was revisiting what was done in the past to see, to take a look at that data that was gathered, and with this committee, take a look at that data that was gathered, look at new developments in this realm, and look at kind of creative ideas that we might find in area communities on how they address start times, and hopefully come forward with some possible options. But we have to go through this process, and it is very much consistent with our health and well-being of students and staff. We understand that this is a really serious issue, and that many people have come forward and said we need to take a look at this. So that's a priority for me, and that falls into the district improvement. Also under district improvement is the communication committee and improving district / superintendent communication. Again, the charge of this one is to see if we can streamline communications as a district, as really 3 districts. It's very difficult when you have a completely separate district in Sherborn and a completely separate district in Dover, and then the region having its own kind of communications, and all of those communications peppering parents who might have kids at all levels can be a real challenge. So we want to look at that and see if there are things that we can do to make that more effective, and weed out that kind of email that almost feels like spam. It's really tough to keep on top of. I'm not sure that we're going to find a magic solution, because we have a lot of information that we generate and that we need to inform people of. In my own personal realm, I'm already started on this with the Superintendent's Newsletter, or the Central Office, the Central Office Newsletter, and I'm also using Twitter and a blog for just venues, really, to kind of give people an opportunity to see what's on my mind as a school leader. And also the coffees have been really helpful. But this is really about looking at streamlining our communications, especially this year, and then next year more specifically looking at our webpage and the effectiveness of our webpage. We have the access to the data on how many hits we're getting and for what. And there are districts that have moved in the direction of making sure that your school has an app, for example. We also expect to have conversations about really the branding of Dover-Sherborn. How do we project to the broader community who we are? So I think it's an exciting process, and I'm looking forward to that. And that too is starting very soon. So those 2 emails to the committee members will go out, and then we just have to really work out the details of when we will hold those meetings.
Can I ask a question on the first 2 goals? The way they're written is very binary. I mean, to announce and to create a committee. Are you implying any outcomes from these 2 goals? It's kind of embedded, but it's not explicit. And I was just so that we know how to measure you against those goals. Otherwise, right now, it's, yep, he made a committee. Mm-hmm. So just curious what your take on.
Actually, I had written it up that way initially, and felt like it was kind of a bombardment of a lot of information that, like, for example, one of my benchmarks might be form a committee, and then I'd confirm later he formed a committee.
Right.
So some of that I find to be just excessive kind of information that looks nice. But my feeling is, quite honestly, if at the end of the school year you feel as if I didn't form that committee to revisit start times, and that we didn't come together and review that information, and that I can't prove to you that we reviewed that information, or if I can't prove to you that we've generated some proposals, then you can say he didn't really meet that goal. So that I wrote it that way intentionally, Dana, and if the rest of the committee feels that it should be more specified, I don't mind doing that.
I think part of it is the details actually in the strategic plan, which
Under
is
the action plan.
under the action plan. So
And maybe it's a matter of
those you need to-
referencing the strategic plan as opposed to reiterating it, but just showing that there's more depth than just did he form a committee, which
Right.
clearly is not the intention of the goal.
See strategic.
Yeah,
Is it in there?
It does say
Sorry.
the strategic
Okay.
objective too.
Oh, okay, that's fair. Okay, got it.
It's a good point, though.
You as the point person and benchmarks or ways to measure.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right. So in the action plan itself, we had the person responsible, the timeline, and the benchmarks.
So maybe it's just a matter of saying see strategic objective 2 for benchmarks and objectives or whatever
Okay.
clarification. I thought you just meant see it aligns, not go see what it says. So that's all.
Okay.
Or maybe I'm just being too picky.
No, it's good.
No, that makes sense.
Okay. So the third district improvement goal, ensure that student services for the district are delivered in a consistent and efficient and effective manner. This is really the special education review. You know that that's happening. We want to make sure that in the end we have an effective leadership model for our student services, and that we've identified any changes to our programming that we want to implement. So the first part of developing the model is kind of in process. We had that first presentation, and now with adjustments and bringing that forward, hopefully we get the support of the joint school committees for that. So that would be part of this, obviously. And then the second part is really, what about our programming? Do we need to make changes, for example, to our LBLD programming? Do we need to make changes to the way that we are dealing with our students with social emotional issues? Does the data justify the programs that we have? Some of that data that was presented that night in the packet was important and very telling. And there's more of it. So this is really about ensuring that that process goes well and that something productive comes from it. Instead of just, kind of talking about, geez, we should really do this with special ed, or we should do that, we're actually doing it. So that's the end game. Goal, sorry, we had 2 goal 2s.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize for that. I'm not really sure why that happened. I caught it when I saw it, but then I didn't correct it. So really goal 4 is also a district improvement goal, which is to ensure that district remains focused on student well-being through emphasis on cultural proficiency, social emotional learning, and student sense of belonging. So I think you'll see in the school improvement plans that they have building goals that align with this district goal, and that the professional goals of the leaders also have this goal within their goals. So this too also reflects back on the health and well-being of students and strategic objective number 2.
So just look at general. So it sort of goes back to the original question of Dana, but I'm thinking about, the call to have SMART goals, right? Measurable goals. And so I totally applaud that this is measurable. I am assuming that if I am later on to judge your success or failure at this, if you did that and there existed goals and no work was done, or work was done that was not effective, I might still decide that you were not very effective at meeting this goal, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to play devil's advocate, but just the existence of the goals without actual meaty work behind them doesn't say, well, I made the goal. I made everyone make a goal. Therefore, I get, right? So, okay.
So can I follow up on that? So also I'm thinking then kind of time frame, because when you looked at a lot of the things, like what Beth was talking about before, most of the things that you're talking about are really 3-year processes. Something like this, is this because losing students, each year you can't wait 3 years or take 3 years to do like the wellness goals? Is that something that you've got more of a priority to get to do more work sooner, or is it still sort of a longer term? It can still be longer term, but it's like with the LBLD program, taking a couple of years to look at it and think about it and review, and those kids are losing time. So I'm sort of thinking the student-specific goals, is there a sense of we want to get those done, or focus on those sooner, or have a shorter time frame, or is it all kind of, I can't quite tell sort of what the time frame is and how you're feeling about the urgency.
So that's really also in the action plan.
I was looking at
In the action
too.
But that shows what year that we're targeting this work on, yes?
It does, but a lot of it still has the 3-year out. So
Right.
I'm sort of figuring out
Because
what is
it's-
it that then is the,
Some of those are ongoing. We're not going
Yeah.
to, for example, flip the switch and suddenly say, we're all set with social emotional learning.
right.
So that's an ongoing, I could have put that out for 6 years or 10, because we will always continue
always be
to
working on it,
concentrate
right.
on that. But I'm not sure how I could be helpful in that one.
I guess what I would wonder if we could see is some anecdotal evidence, because some of it is just we don't have a comprehensive way to measure success of social emotional learning. Like there just does not exist a effective, widely accepted instrument that we could apply to the people and know whether or not it's working. But I would be looking for that one for some anecdotal examples of action, things that have happened in the district over the past year that show here are some things we were not doing before and some things, and here's some feedback as to why that's effective. That's what I would be looking for. More than like, here are the 12 people and here is what their goal was. Well, okay, well, great.
And if I could add to that one too, something I think is so important is that student sense of belonging. I feel like that's a really important one. How do we measure
We ask
that?
them. That's like a student feedback.
Oh, is that a survey?
There needs to be
What we're
some
looking
feedback,
for?
like how did you feel? How well do you belong? You know, the post-alumni survey. But whether there's things that we're doing or not doing already, the way you find that out is by asking.
Okay.
There's no other way.
There is no other way.
Okay.
I mean,
So I
I
guess
guess
we're
you
going to
could
see
look
that.
at, percentages of students requiring outplacements for social emotional issues. I mean, and if that's
But
increasing,
that's a more complicated thing.
it's a really
because you put a
difficult.
bridge program in, and we're a
This-
small community, and now you're drilling down into individual students.
These are very difficult things to quantify.
Is a survey,
Social emotional well-being is pretty tough to quantify.
is that survey on, I should know this, but on is it an action item on any of the social and emotional wellness objectives
So-
in here?
So the social emotional wellness committee is being formed, and that is their charge, much like the innovation committee, will be to generate additional surveys.
Great.
But we survey kids a lot. We have some of that data. We have data from the Metro West Youth Risk Survey. We have challenge success data. So we have some data. The high school has prioritized, for example, in their NEASC self-evaluation, that student sense of belonging is a priority for them. They didn't just decide that it was. They based that on the data, which came from the surveys of the students and faculty. So they are, they're using that information and actually responding to that information.
Is this a Metro West Health Survey year for Dover-Sherborn?
Yes.
So will you have access to that data by June? Like the results of the fall survey?
I believe so.
I think so.
You should,
Towards the end of the year.
I don't think so.
They're just taking it
July?
now.
Right.
Right. I don't think we
July.
get it this year.
Okay.
In time. I'm not positive about that, but I can
I thought we
follow
get
up on that.
our information, but then we don't get against the cohorts till
Right.
another 2 or 3 months later.
I just have to look.
But if you
I
get
don't-
yours,
I haven't-
that's a point of data that you can say, like, okay, 3 years ago, kids were saying, or 2 years ago, whenever they last gave
Every
it.
other
That
year.
is a question that gets asked, is what is your sense of belonging and well-being?
Right. As Andrew said, one of the tasks of the Social Emotional Learning Committee, otherwise known as the Wellness Committee this year, is going to be to look at what data we already collect
Great.
and what's missing. Like, we know that the 3-year survey for the Metro West will come out. We know that we've done challenge success twice within 5 years, every 10 years since NEASC. What do we need to ask more regularly? And we're also looking at the teacher evaluation survey that we've given kiddos in the past to see if it's actually answering the questions that we want, and perhaps creating our own, both for resource efficiency, but also for meaningfulness and asking questions along the lines of connecting with adults and connecting with others is going to be a component of that. So we'll identify what needs to be done on a more annual basis, and kind of focus that so the kids aren't being surveyed all the time.
Great.
So we would definitely need that information, though, for our end of year, say our June meeting. That would be great to have at least some feedback.
Sure.
So, speaking to this this idea, so how would we know that any of this stuff happened, is when at the end of the year, when you evaluate me, I'm supposed to tell you how I did towards meeting my goals, and that's where you get my evidence of the things that.
Okay.
And I don't bring in a wheelbarrow with all the evidence, but it just like the teachers used to joke about that when am I supposed to wheel it all in. I don't do that, but if you say I'd like to see evidence, can you show me some, blanked out principal goals or something like that that says you did what you said you were going to do? That's usually where that happens in my experience, but if you want to do it a different way.
No, that's good.
That's perfect.
As long as we have it to be able to help inform the evaluations, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I've discussed this with a few of the folks on the school committee, the sense was that the strategic plan and the action plans are pretty specific about things that we're supposed to be doing, and so the expectation is that I would be able to demonstrate that those things either happened or not. To know the effect of those things is perhaps more challenging.
Right.
That can be more challenging.
Yes.
Did a social emotional learning committee actually impact student social emotional kind of states? That's a bigger question.
And the other complication is we do this in April. So we don't even get a full year's worth of data. That's the time frame that we use to
Evaluation
evaluate.
is April. Okay.
Yeah, that's a very
tomorrow.
Yeah, right?
That's a big
my
challenge.
calendar.
That's a really big challenge. So, I mean, I'm open to discussion on how to do that. I mean, I think there's a reason why you do that in April and not May or June. So,
Well, it's important to do it before May because that's when the committees turn over before the elections.
Right.
Otherwise,
Otherwise, sometimes when we
Yes.
first started, your first meeting was the evaluation. We were like, we just got here.
Right.
Yeah, so we backtracked it for that purpose.
That makes sense.
So maybe as we think like sort of long term, some of it is getting some interim data, and then also thinking like a year from April, let's look at these goals. Like, assuming that you're not going to cook up a whole new set of goals every year, right? Like some of them are going to end up being
Deeper.
longer term or deeper dives into previous goals, and just kind of looking at stuff long term.
I find the goal setting process somewhat frustrating for teachers too.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think it's important to have goals and for those goals to be measurable, but I don't think it's in our best interest to focus all of our energies on the quality of our goals. You should be able to tell whether or not I'm doing a good job or not based on the complete picture. That's kind of what's been lost in the current evaluation system with all these standards and this kind of mile wide but an inch deep evaluations that people are getting. You lose that kind of bigger picture, which ultimately is what an evaluator has to do, is look at the big picture of all these things and is it happening. So it's tricky. I have mixed feelings about it, but I will do whatever it is that you think is best on these, whether it's we get into more specifics on how you can measure whether these things have happened, whatever you think is best.
Remember, because this is just part of the evaluation too, though, but Andrew said it's the standards is the big part of it, that you have to pick from a lot to pull together for the standards.
Right.
These are just half. This isn't even half. This is just a small piece. So it really helps, I think, if, you guys probably get the evaluation, you have it, but refer to that a lot because there are a lot of things that you can make notes throughout the year. So you're not waiting till April. And I think part of the goal, when I'm speaking of having been on the Superintendent Evaluation Committee for multiple years, is that you don't, every time we have a meeting, we're touching upon things that are part of the evaluation. So it's always good to sort of have that and just jot notes down. I think the first year we did it, we had a notebook for everyone.
I was going to say, I
So that
already
you
loved
could
my
capture,
notebook. Yeah.
right? So you could
Yeah,
capture
that was-
everything, and because part of our job is to every month have something that shows that we're meeting the standards, we're hitting the goals. So it's not just one meeting where everything's presented, you're picking up along the way. So I think it's been so long since your members have done it that it might be worth just rethinking how you're going to attack it and
Yeah, I mean,
make sure we're not waiting until April to figure out, but
so that would
do
be
it
the superintendent evaluation subcommittee, which is, I believe, all the chairs.
Okay.
So I think it's the 4 of you guys.
Okay. We can.
So instead of waiting till
Together
April
on
to
that?
meet, you might want to. It would be
Be a
great for
coordinator.
us if you started directing the thinking and the process. That
Action item. I like it. Okay.
May I add one other piece?
Yep.
So if you think back to the last joint meeting, I think prior to the meeting, you received the 11-page outline of action steps versus the chart form with all the blue 5-page document that actually came out in the PowerPoint in the day of. If you go back to the 11-page document, you'll notice things like the revisit school start time to include review of applicant current research. It says superintendent and start time committee, and then it says convene committee, review former documents, conduct additional research, and finalize report that outlines findings and recommendations. That's year 1. So they'll be expected to be a report, findings and recommendations, and then year 2 is implement recommendations. So we need to see evidence.
Yeah.
Right?
Hopefully I can
So
produce
you're
that.
here, yes.
If I don't, then I get a poor rating.
So, right, we can refer back to these as our focal points.
Right.
Right.
So I don't know if you need any more explanation on that, or?
I think, any other questions?
can you just talk a little bit on goal 5, the student learning one, because that's the hardest, I think, to make the link from a superintendent down to the student learning. So can you just elaborate on that one a little bit?
That is really my supervision of Beth, because Beth is leading the innovation committee and the curriculum reviews. It's just making sure that those things are happening. And I don't know how we described it in there, that particular, or did, actually that doesn't, yeah, no, that's under innovation, teaching and learning. There's a number of action steps in there, aren't there?
Yes. Sorry, this is about
That's okay. Don't, it's, what I wanted to say in that goal is that I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that in the midst of this process of looking at social emotional learning and cultural proficiency and start times and communications, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that our academic programs, the rigor of our academic programs, the nature of our offerings, or the breadth of our offerings and the quality of our offerings, I don't want to lose sight of that. And that's really connected very much to the curriculum work that's going on with the math in year 1 this year, and the curriculum work for English in its second year, making sure that those things are happening, the rigor, the consistency, alignment, and then the innovation committee and finding programs and offerings that we could include here that are on the cutting edge. And so that's the goal there.
Right, so as you saw last year with the English program, having done kind of a self-reflection and gathered data, we looked at our practices and our program against best standards, and then we had that action plan at the end, with a picture of your truck actually saying this is where we're going. And so that then informed the English department's work this year. So all of their goals are around that curriculum work. So we should, at the end of this year, be able to go back and say, okay, of the action plan for the English department, they did 1, 2, and 3. The same thing, the math department at the end of this year will have their action plan for the next 5 years. We're now in year 3 of science, so we should be able to go back and say last year we did X and Y, this year we did A and B. And so they're theoretically moving towards a better program because they were initially measured against those standards and then decided where we were deficient and worked to address them. I think the evaluation procedures, again, it would be simple enough to redact information from sample evaluations and kind of show you what evaluation language used to look like and how
Which
much
was
feedback and constructive criticism there was given versus what is now being worked on and what the goal is towards the end of the year in terms of supporting educators and moving them in the right direction.
right. So when, for example, when we did our training with the administrators this year, and we were looking at, the quality of the evaluations our teachers receive, we looked at sample information and shared it anonymously with the leadership team to see if it was in fact meaningful. Was it helpful? Does this actually impact teaching or the students ultimately? So we're also so that's the training of evaluators. We're also obviously looking at the evaluation procedures. We had that conversation earlier about the QPO, and is that working? And we believe it was not. It wasn't the most effective approach. So when it comes time for me to present my work at the end of the year, you should expect to see that these things are listed as things that we actually did. Then the next question is, does it have any impact on kids? Well, that's a very difficult thing to prove. It's a really hard thing to prove unless we can, gather evidence like you said, evaluations that were written in the past and evaluations that are written now.
Well, I think the student surveys that are provided to get feedback about teachers, the kinds of questions that we're asking are what we're looking for in observations and providing feedback through the evaluation system. So this year, for example, we're focusing on student engagement and what does that look like, and is compliance the same as engagement, et cetera. So when we provide surveys to the kids in April or so, based on their teachers, that's a question that we can ask and see if it aligns with what we've been kind of making, or the observations and feedback we've been providing, and are we getting the results for kids that we've been pushing to get? Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. I think we're good.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Excellent.
No problem.
All right, the enrollment report.
So this isn't the deep dive. This is the kind of snapshot of where we were on October 1st. I think it's important, obviously, for you to know. I think it's helpful, hopefully, for you to see any trends through the years, which you'll see on the second page. Our total 10 years ago was 608 in the high school, or 1150 total, and 1202 this year. So, we have trended upward. But if you look more closely in the numbers, you'll see these kind of odd fluctuations. So it's really hard to predict where we're going, but I think our next set of enrollment data that we include in the budget booklet is a better indicator, where we do the 1 year and the 3 year projections. We also have included in this our special education in district, our Boston students and our ELL students. So you can see where those numbers lie, K through 12. I don't know if there are any questions about that.
No enrollment questions?
I always think one of the interesting things is for several years ago, when we would look at this kind of information, we say, oh, there's such small classes in the elementary schools, we're going to see our enrollment fall off. And every year, by the time they get to the middle school, our grade is up. I mean, our numbers are up. So that's the only thing that I would caution someone who hasn't looked at this data year in and year out might make that assumption, and it is not borne out over the past 6 years that I've been here.
Yeah.
Well, in the 30 years, or 40, I should say, since I was here, I graduated with 180 students, which you can see in ninth grade we have 179, 176, 178. The highest that I know of was 200. And so, and at this this current class of seniors at 154, you know, what I've heard from people, and I think it's true. I can't prove it with the data because I don't have all of that, but I do believe that we've remained kind of steady as a system.
Yeah.
Where we sometimes face challenges is that we have added some programs. We've changed the way we deliver special education, and that's required that we use spaces in different ways, and that can be challenging. But I think our buildings are still accommodating our students quite well.
I mean, if you think over the 10 years, we've only fluctuated 50. I mean, that's pretty
Right.
steady.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We are seeing you keep in mind that both elementaries did reduce the section last year. And the trends are looking that could be a potential for this year too. So that it's you know, we had a growth spurt and then we've sort of didn't maintain. So we are seeing some smaller class grades still coming. This might be the last large fifth grade that you see coming up for a little bit because those numbers aren't staying the same level. At least now. You never know. There's a lot of stuff going on in both towns. So.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to number 8, the consent agenda. Any holds, any comments? Any discussion? Hearing none, do we have any motions to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, any seconds? Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any questions, concerns, anything that you want to forward along regarding the communications from the Headmaster's report, the middle school Headmaster's report, Sherborn or Dover minutes?
No.
Okay. Any items, invite conversation for any items that you want to discuss for the December 4th meeting, bearing in mind that's going to be a joint busy one.
I'm going to hold for the agenda you all have planned for us.
It's going to be busy. Okay, and well, if you do, please feel free to reach out, but
Can I just quick, so
Yep.
Beth, I believe you said that, was it the December meeting for the deeper dive into the APs? Should we move that to January?
That's your choice. I can give you the data in December. We can discuss it in January. I can hold it till January. I know in the past we've invited department heads to join us, and I think oftentimes they have not. So it's happy to do my best explaining the data that's there.
I don't think we have
It's
room
mostly
for
gonna be
the
a-
I
conversation.
don't think, and there wasn't anything super surprising
Yeah,
and then
really,
to be
there wasn't.
borne out.
Yeah, so that if there are any glaring details, I'll make sure I follow up and ask
I didn't
specific
see
questions.
anything.
to
Yeah.
So
shared.
Beth, give us the data and we'll
Okay.
In fact, the only
digest.
question I had was interesting. Number of kids down, number of tests up.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That was my observation.
Good point.
Yes. And my 2 cents to that is I am always delighted when our teachers open up the AP classes to as many children who want to take them, even though sometimes that costs them in high scores. I think the AP should be open to all who would like to take it.
Exactly, right. I agree.
That'd be great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, we are going to adjourn the meeting and move into a brief executive session, not to return. Thank you very much.
Do we have to poll?
Oh, Paul.
Yeah. Yes. Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. Thanks.